get through this. I guess some of the investment highlights is a good place to start, and Iggy just identified that at one time Altec had a market cap of 5 million. We've got a market cap of about 7 million, so we're certainly at the early stages, and great opportunity to buy in at low prices. For our process, we're actually taking ore from New Caledonia. It's a high-grade ore. It's at least 2 or 3 times higher grade than anything that's available in Australia in respect to nickel and cobalt. So we think that's an important part of our project, and I'll come back to that. We're building the plant to process the ore in Townsville. Townsville's been importing ore since 1987, and all the approvals are in place for importation, and there's a healthy respect for processing that's been developed since the years of QN in operation since 1973. It's a great place to be, and of course, because we haven't got a mine and we don't need to wade through the various approvals associated with that, we can actually get the project up ready for financial investment decision in about 18 months. Yeah, I guess new kid on the block, high grade, Townsville location, and we can get into business very quickly are the key investment highlights. Back in May, towards the end of May, Queensland Pacific Metal was acquired by Pure Minerals, ASX listed company. So you know, we're now in a position to raise equity, and we've subsequent to that happening, we've raised about $2.5 million to allow us to proceed or finish the pre-feasibility study. We've also secured a binding ore supply agreement for 15 years with New Caledonia. We've entered into agreement with Direct Nickel for the initial process, a royalty agreement to use that intellectual property. We've got an agreement with the CSIRO for the subsequent refining process, and I'll talk a bit more detail about those. And we've got land and all the things in place in Townsville to proceed with the project. We've got about 350 hectares, and that's been rezoned to heavy industry, and we've finished most of the environmental studies now, so things are going quite well. What's the project all about? Well, I touched on it before. We're importing ore out of New Caledonia, about 600,000 tonnes wet, so it's about nearly 400,000 tonnes dry. So not a big lot of ore. Shipped into Townsville. We talked about Townsville, great place to be. I guess we're using a direct nickel process which was developed by the CSIRO and Direct Nickel back in 2014, and it hasn't been commercialised at this point, and we'll talk about that also. We've actually already, the CSIRO have already produced small quantities of battery precursor, that's nickel and cobalt sulfate, so that's looking good, and the 600,000 tonnes produces about 26,000 tonnes of nickel sulfate and about 3,000 tonnes of cobalt sulfate, and a number of other valuable products. I guess just a picture of what the process is about. Laterite ore, processing it through the direct nickel process to produce a concentrate called MHP, or mixed hydroxide precipitate. Out of that MHP, the MHP contains the nickel and the cobalt, and we end up with a number of co-products such as iron, magnesium, alli and scandium, and we hope one day to be able to convert that 10,000 tonnes of alli to HPA. You know, when you listen to the Altec story, it's probably a great place to be. Not so sure about scandium, but the iron, there's about 300,000 tonnes of 66% Fe hematite, so it's quite a valuable product, and certainly has the potential to be converted through to high purity pig iron. Magnesium we use back in the process, so a lot of that's recycled, but there's about 10,000 tonnes of high purity Mg, highly reactive for sale also. So the I guess the benefit of being able to take those co-products out, one is that it creates some additional revenue for the project, but more importantly, we don't end up with dissolved metals into residue or tailings at the back end of the plant. The CSIRO have already developed, and we're now looking at building the pilot plant for processing the MHP. This MHP is a little bit different in that it's been produced in a nitrate environment using nitric acid. So, you know, I guess it's the traditional MHP that comes from high pressure acid leach. It's very similar grades. It just comes, instead of using sulfuric acid, we're using nitric acid. Yeah, I guess the manganese, I should point out too, the manganese ends up, most of it ends up in the MHP. So interestingly enough, and it's quite a coincidence, I'm sure, that you know, when people talk about 811 NCM, you know, the ratio of nickel, cobalt and manganese in the MHP is about 811, so off to a good start. Townsville, you know, you're probably aware that Queensland Nickel has been, was built up there in 1973, and KWF, or KFW, I'm sorry, actually funded most of the initial work up there, and the railway line from Greenvale, and so there's, it's interesting to hear their name again this morning. The acid supply, Orica at Gladstone can supply our makeup acid. We recycle all the nitric acid, so the makeup acid isn't a great quantity, so we don't need to build an acid plant, keeps the capital cost down. The sulfuric acid for the refining process comes from locally produced at Korean Zinc or Sun Metals, so again a good spot to be. New Caledonia currently exports about 7.5 million tonnes to the likes of POSCO and Sumitomo. Mostly saprolite, you know, the bottom profile of the ore. We're actually taking the limonite. The limonite has the higher iron, certainly the higher cobalt, slightly lower nickel grade than saprolite. So again, that's a good position to be in, because that limonite has to be removed in order to get to the saprolite, which is their main export product. Just a quick snapshot of the imports into Queensland, to Queensland Nickel. There's a couple of million tonnes been coming from New Caledonia since 1987, and there's a snapshot just to show the grades and quantities are very reliable, very consistent, and no reason why they won't continue on for the next 100 years. The plant, the DNI, or direct nickel plant, which was built by the CSIRO, has been kept in good condition. It's in a big shed over at Waterford at the uni in WA. It takes about 1 tonne per day, which is doesn't sound like much, but I guess it's significantly larger than most pilot plants that are around the 200 or 300 kilos a day. So it's an ideal opportunity to actually not just play around in the lab, but rather run full-scale testing with recycle loads and things like that, and develop quite firm outcomes for the metallurgists to complete the commercial plant design. The CSIRO, I mentioned before, are developing the refining process. The guys at Waterford, at CSIRO Minerals, also developed the refining process for BHP, for taking the LME grade nickel at Kwinana and putting it back in solution and making a 4/9 grade sulphate. Iggy mentioned before that you know, in the aluminium or HPA business, taking you know, high purity metal and going backwards didn't seem like a very good business. Well, I'm not sure that the approach of taking nickel LME grade nickel metal and going backwards is a great idea. Hence the reason that we're looking at starting with a concentrate, which is always at a discount, at a significant discount to the metal price, and then producing a sulphate that's sold at a premium to the nickel price. That's just a schematic of where we are at Townsville, and it's a great site. It's the old CSIRO Lansdowne Industrial Complex, about 6,500 hectares. We've got 350 hectares allocated. We have power, both 250, 66 and 11 kV. We have a 30 petajoule gas line running right through the property, fibre optics, railway line, water. So it's a good site. The road out to Charters Towers is a Class 1 road train route, so we can haul up to 125 tonnes along that road. We've completed a scoping study, and the capital cost is about $300 million US. The revenues for at current nickel prices, nickel and cobalt prices, is about 260 million a year. So, and our EBITDA is about 130 million. So, it's it's quite a good project. Maybe not as exciting as the numbers that previously presented for HPA, but we've got a ways to go. We actually have Lycopodium working on the feasibility study, a pre-feasibility study, and within the next week we'll announce the results of that. But at this stage it's looking quite good, and our scoping study really reflects where we expect to end up. I talked before about the project being a short project to getting to financial investment decision, and we're on track with that schedule. The pre-feasibility study finished at the end of this quarter. Well, we're a week behind, I guess, and we'll catch that up. We're bringing 100 tonne now of ore from New Caledonia, and we'll be processing that through the pilot plant. That'll not only give us all the reliable data for the commercial scale plant, but more importantly, it'll actually produce significant quantities of both nickel and cobalt sulfate. And we'll be looking at putting that in our backpack and heading off to Korea and Japan and North America to talk to the battery producers that we've already had discussions with, but to look at some product acceptance testing and performance testing, and with the ultimate objective of trying to find a cornerstone investor that is interested in the project. I mentioned earlier on, we're the new kid on the block. We've got a market cap of well, we're saying 8 million, so I guess it's gone up since I last looked at this slide. When we joined PM1, the share price was about 1.3 cents. It's gone up a little bit. I guess we expect that with the announcement of the PFS, that will be our significant step change, and obviously, we need to be up around the 100 million market cap to progress this project at a commercial scale. Nickel market is looking quite favourable, and the CAU presentation earlier on is all good news, and even good news for cobalt. I guess in summary, we've got high-grade ore from New Caledonia. We've got a positive scoping study that'll ultimately be a pre-feasibility study within the next 2 weeks. We've got very near-term production. Townsville location, 15% unemployment in Townsville currently, and so there's like third-generation metallurgists and chemical engineers that are really looking out to and love to join this operation and make it work. Battery market fundamentals. So, currently there's a premium for the nickel and cobalt contained in sulfate. So that's good for revenues. We've got an experienced management team with lots and lots of years of time in the nickel business, both here and around the world. I guess the conundrum that was raised in the CAU report is that batteries, the cost of batteries needs to come down, needs to be halved to get to the point where you can actually buy an EV that's comparably costed to a conventional internal combustion engine. For that to happen, Iggy mentioned there's got to be increased current densities, and that goes part of the way, but the other part is surely to reduce the cost of building a battery. And we think, you know, lower capital cost, lower operating cost, by being able to sell co-products and support revenue is the way to go, and that ultimately some of these premiums might actually go away, where all of a sudden the nickel that's included in sulfates, for instance, might be at 100% of the nickel price. Under those scenarios, our operation can still survive, and we think that we will contribute to solving the problem of reducing the battery cost. That's it.
Excellent. Thanks, John.